When did you first grow curious about the paranormal? Dare you dig deeper? You are listening to House of Asher.
And welcome everybody to this episode of House of Asher. This is episode 56, and as things we're starting to roll into October and getting closer to that, and we're not there. We are for me. As soon as it hits September, that's Halloween time for me. I don't care if you guys want to start putting out Christmas stuff now. Back up, give us our Samhain, give us our time. I think we're pretty understanding. So there's that. But growing up, I always had an interest in magic. I always had an interest in the esoteric. I always had an interest in all that stuff that ties in with that. You know, obviously, you guys know I grew up on Hammer films and a lot of the Poe adaptations, Vincent Price stuff, and always had an interest in witchcraft. And you know, growing up in the South, that could be kind of a deal breaker, but that's okay. But I was lucky enough in my time of speaking with different folks to come across this next guest, and I want to do like a quick little intro because, you know, I want to make it sound fancy. Brian Cain, he's a teacher, psychic medium, and a New Orleans, as I would say, warlock. He is the co-host of Hex Fest, along with his husband Christian, and he's involved in so many different businesses and so much stuff that I'm going to let him speak more about, and definitely talk about him being a devotee of Old English witchcraft. Sir.
Hello,
Brian.
Steve. How are you? Thank you for having me on the show.
I'm very lucky and very happy to have you.
Kind of like what you were telling me early on, I became interested in the occult around the age of 13. I didn't get heavily into it until much later, but I was interested, and I was reading books about witchcraft, gypsy love magic, whatever I could find, because I did have a childhood friend whose mother was a witch, and I would go over to his house and there would be these strange books. We wouldn't discuss it. We just thought they were curiosities, and that's probably what sparked my interest. It wasn't until I was an adult that I actually found out that she was in the craft, and I found out there was more going on than meets the eye. But like you, I started very young, but I was raised Christian. You know, I wasn't raised in a witchcraft household. I don't think very many people are. You know, but once it gets inside of you, once you get that awareness that there's something else going on in the shadows, so to speak, I think you have to penetrate those mysteries. So I did go on and eventually enter the craft, find teachers, get initiated, work with covens, run covens, all the way up to the present day, where I run the New Orleans coven here in New Orleans, obviously. I do own 3 stores with my husband, Hex Salem and Omen in Salem, and Hex New Orleans. They're all witchcraft stores. Omen is also a psychic parlor. We have Hex Fest and the Festival of the Dead, which is coming up right here in October, where we host the Witches' Ball, the Dumb Supper, the annual psychic fair, etc., etc. So yes, we've got ourselves branched out quite a lot into the craft. We're also starting our own publishing company, Warlock's Press, where we're going to be focusing primarily on initiates and real occultists. You know, we want it to be the best of the best, the cream of the crop. We're not trying to make it, you know, the next Llewellyn. It's definitely going to be centered more around specialties and people who are extremely knowledgeable that you might not be able to find elsewhere.
Well, and that's the great thing about following a passion and being specialized in what you enjoy. To do, you know, and to be able to bring something that, again, is sort of a something that's very personal to you. And I think that just like in spell work, you know, again, I'm not a witch, but I know a little bit about it. Your intent in the spell, the passion that you bring to the spell, all that, you know, increases the potency. You know, just like an act of love. You know, if the passion's not there, why do it? And I think that it's admirable, and it's really neat that you're able to do that. That you've taken something, a concept, an idea, and basically will it into being like that.
Well, there is a reason it's called the art magical. It is an art, and it takes an artist to make it work. You have to be inspired. You have to. There's a show called Salem. I'm sure you've seen it. Sure. And I hate to quote a show in real magic, but there's a line in it that I think really does hit home for the craft, even though it's, completely historically inaccurate show and the witches are half evil. It's still, beautifully delicious. And she says, to work magic, you must be aroused. I couldn't agree more. You have to be aroused. You have to be inspired. It has to be something that's coming from within you and that you can connect with very deeply. That's why it doesn't work for everyone. It's not Make-A-Wish Foundation. You can't just light a candle and say some words and have it happen. There's got to be something going on. And it does often take intense training to really hone that skill. I think it's been said before, there's cooks and there's chefs and there's 5-star chefs. Anyone can boil an egg. Well, there are some people that can foul that out too, right? Really?
Sure.
But, most people could boil an egg. That doesn't mean, that they're going to be able to prepare a meal at a 5-star restaurant. So it's really, it really is a very wide-ranging thing when we're talking about spell work. We're talking about working magic. You're essentially attempting to play God, and you are essentially attempting to steal fire from heaven, or hell, as the case may be in some circumstances.
Well, and aren't we all? I think that's the reason that we're here. I don't think that, okay, like we're talking about quoting, media. There was a line from, I believe the name of the film was The Witch, and they had the goat. Spoilers, so if you haven't watched the show, don't.
Black Phillip.
And he said, "Do you want to live deliciously?" And I'm like,
yes,
of course I want to live deliciously. Who wants to live bland? Who wants to just?
There are those people out there, Steve, that want to live bland. They feel like they should. I think so. One of the things about Massachusetts, and I do love me some Massachusetts. I'm about to go up there for October. But there's still Puritan culture there too, Salem's definitely the witch's city now, but there's still Puritan culture. You can't get beer and wine in 7-Eleven. What's going on there? Living in the South, it's quite the culture shock to go somewhere and go into a 7-Eleven and see that there's no alcohol served, because you can only get alcohol at liquor stores, except on Sundays. There still is, that sort of pocket Puritan culture in different places in the world where they don't want to live deliciously because they don't think they should be allowed, and people don't give themselves permission to be happy, which is why we have so much misery in the world.
Well, there was a thing. I'm the youngest of 7, and there was I don't know, I forgot when it was. I guess it was really small. I don't remember the moment, but my brother was talking to me, Michael, and he was saying because I was talking about trying to do the radio stuff, and and I've worked on some books about hauntings in this area and things like that. And, I said, I never thought that would happen. Honestly, just because my mind wasn't there. And he said, it doesn't surprise me. And I'm like, I don't see it. I had no interest in writing. He says, no, there was just a moment. He said, we were little kids and there was something, we had to go do something or to complete some task. And I was trying to do it completely differently. But just the way my mind works is just different. It's not that it's better, it's just different. And he says, well, no, you have to do this. It's like, no, you can just, well, who says I have to do it like this? Well, that's just how you do it. But yeah, I don't want to, I just want to do it this way. And then I have more time for fun. That's the thing, and he says, and he's like, I looked at it and I was like, yeah, I guess that would work. But it's completely different than everybody else. But I'm like, okay, so what, and that's, to me, that's the crux of it. I want my, I'm not necessarily saying I want big mansions and stuff, but I want my rewards now. And
you'll settle for better in a pretty dress. Is that what you're saying? Pretty
much. But it was just a thing of
people's expectations were lower back then.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is, and I've always told my kids, cause it's it's sort of a funny thing. I guess maybe I'm a little bit of a hedonist. But it's a thing of going like, look, if you guys can support yourself doing something you love, as long as you're not hurting somebody and you're not hurting yourself, go do it. Don't don't get me wrong. I would like to see you, if you could, complete your schooling and do this and that and whatever. I said, but, dude, I was in punk bands. I was, all over the place. Who the heck am I to tell you how to live? I mean, I can kind of go, look, I have had issues in that area because of blah, blah, blah. Maybe don't do this, or maybe you can do better than me. So, which is, my wife's kind of putting her hands in the air like, oh God. But I've always just, how it is. I mean, I hate lying to kids because my kids always go, yeah, Dad, remember Santa Claus? I said, yeah, I remember Santa Claus. I was always the guy that had to kind of be the hatchet guy when it come time to tell them, because they're old enough, that they're going to school and, talking about Santa and kids are making fun of them. So I had to be that guy. And I said, yeah, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm just not. So, like you said, go out, experience, live, and gain all the knowledge you can. I think it was the Sex Pistols that was talking about, big beautiful mistakes. If you're gonna blow up big, which is horrible advice from a parent. But I'm just saying, take that jump, take the risk. Sometimes, do a calculated risk, but don't live in fear. Don't live scared. It's not sound like I'm freaking Tony Robbins or something, but don't let anybody tell you how to live, because they're living their life, man. They're not going to.
Mistakes are our best teachers, aren't they?
Exactly. If you haven't made a mistake,
if you don't make mistakes, you're not living right.
You're not living exactly right, and that's.
So I think that's actually very good advice.
Well, like I said, it's a little different, and again, I was raised somewhat different, and like you talked about your kind of religious background. There was a point where, I was like, I don't want to go to church anymore. I don't dislike the people, but I don't feel anything there. It's sort of, I used to read a lot of Van Rice, still do. And it talks about moments where you kind of feel like a son of perdition, like you feel like I don't belong here. Not that something's wrong with me, but it's just like, this is not my clan. I don't feel I'm on the same path. I support these people to believe whatever, but I don't feel like that anymore. And when you are sort of on the fringes like that, it can be scary, but it's also extremely liberating. And I'm assuming that's sort of how you must feel. I mean, again, I'm making really big blanket assumptions of who you are and how you feel, but.
Well, I was raised, early on, I was raised in a Christian family, but we were Christian like we were Americans. My parents weren't really avid churchgoers. My father would dip in and dip out of religion. He was a Christian. I'd even go so far to say he was a fundamentalist on some level. However, he was also not very good at structure, and he wasn't very good at following any kind of hierarchy. So he experimented with trying to be Catholic, no. He experimented with trying to be Mormon, no. Eventually sort of ended with sort of being I guess, Pentecostal type. He was raised Baptist. And my mother was raised Mormon, and she was just really easygoing. She just really didn't, she's still with us. She's, and loves the fact that I'm a witch, but she was always easygoing. She did it, but she didn't really have any judgment there. So, it wasn't until funny enough, about the same time I started getting exposed to witchcraft, my father was getting really into, Pentecostal charismatic type Christianity and watching the church shows and going to church more frequently. And so I was sort of exposed to both fronts. At one point in time, I made the rebellious decision that I was going to become a Catholic priest. We weren't Catholic. That was the first problem. But I loved the beauty, and I loved the ritual, and I loved the structure. So I was on a quest to find God myself.
Well, and the outfits are fabulous.
Absolutely, and I love ritual. I was on a quest to find God myself, and I did start going to church on my own at a very early age. I even went to a temple called Beth HaShanah, which is kind of like a Jews for Jesus. They were started by Jewish people who believed that Jesus was the Messiah. And I thought, well, if Jesus was Jewish, I might get the real old stuff here. So I was definitely exploring. And, when I transferred to the craft, it wasn't because I became disillusioned with God. It was because I found the face of God, Dion Fortune said in one of her books that when they went to kiss the ass of the devil, that was academic there, Steve. When they went to kiss the ass of the devil, they parted the veil of Isis. So sometimes when we're looking for God in all the wrong places, we just happen to find it in the right place. And so for me, it was the epiphany that there was a divine feminine in God as well, that God, that we had a mother and a father. That appealed to me on a deep level in my soul. So I wasn't one of these, rebellious teenagers who said, oh, I don't believe in the Christian church anymore. Though I must say, I think there was a bit of hypocrisy there. I think that the fact that you're not involved in the rituals yourselves and that you're just sort of a spectator, those sorts of things were probably turn-offs for me. I like to be involved in what I'm doing. And I like to be involved in my worship. And I'm an artist, so I like things to be beautiful. So it's a small wonder that I gravitated somewhat towards Catholicism and ended up in witchcraft.
Well, since we were, touching on little elements of religion, because like I said, I as a rule I don't.
And I still believe in God.
Well, did not Jesus say that God dwells within? I think it has nothing to do with the spectacle of gold crosses and giant 3-level running tracks and all this and that. I don't know. I'm and I'm sure I'll probably get some mail, but it's okay. My thing is, I'm not saying you have to walk around in rags and have ash on your face as a sign of contrition. But if you have enough to build all that, I guarantee there's probably someone in your community that needs some help. And that's not saying, I am also a bit of a believer in time of going, look, you can aid a person or you can cripple a person. There's a difference between someone who is in true need or someone who is looking for a mark or is not self-motivated at all. But, it's one of these things where when you are, like you said, have so much opulence to the point of that you're sort of insular, you're not of the world to the degree of you don't feel people suffering and you just are only worried about the flock. I think that gets a little dangerous and isolationist.
Well, it's the same in the craft. Real witches are meant to heal. They're meant to work protection. They're meant to give counseling, guidance. There's lots of covens who help the homeless. There are lots of, you don't hear about it in that grand way because we're talking about smaller groups. There's lots of charities that are supported. We are priests and priestesses, so part of our task is giving back and serving humanity. It's just not done in a way that's proselytizing, so we're not as open about it. And we're often sought out. People seek us out when they're in great need and often quite desperate. And we don't charge those people. If someone comes to our coven, if somebody comes to me for work, if you came to me and said, Brian Cain, I have terminal cancer. I shouldn't open up this, I probably shouldn't open up this door. If I have terminal cancer, I've gone, I am gone to the doctors, I've done all these things, I'm doing all these things. Will you help me? The answer would be yes. You wouldn't be charged anything. And I'd be very honest with you. I would either help you live or I would help you die. But in any case, I would be there to help you. That is part of the purpose of the craft. Yes, it's all great to be able to use magic to get yourself a new car or, a fabulous vacation. But, at the same time, you have to be able to give back. You have to have that balance.
Right. Well, there's that, like you said, there's that funny balance, and it's all about duality to me. As much as it's like people's like, well, I don't believe in God, I believe in the devil. Well, if you believe in something evil, you have to believe in something positive too, or vice versa. I don't think you can have it one way. I think we're hardwired for duality, just in
absolutely.
the way we treat each other. But I feel that, and again, I feel like I'm, preaching up here, but it's a thing of, okay, if I'm going to help somebody, no one else is going to know about it. Because of their pride and of their privacy, and sometimes I see things that are kind of photo ops, and it really kind of turns my stomach. And I've seen it in a lot of different things, be it faith, be it whatever. I'm not going to call it any certain institution, but you see it a lot. And there's sometimes, not that it's saying these people aren't being helped, but like you said, it's like, hey, here you go, and here's some stuff. Oh, by the way, here's some Bibles. Or, hey, we need you to come to this meeting, or we expect you to, be contrite over this and that. I've always been if you're going to help them. If not, leave them alone.
Well, it's very different in the craft because we don't have a large organization. We're not organized religion. So we don't have this one platform or this one person speaking for all of us. So usually it's coming in small groups that are hidden and unknown to where people are working in this way. And because of our, we have to have privacy in a lot of cases. Most of us have secret initiates. So, it's got to sort of be done cloak and dagger. But they know I've got people who come knocking at my door once in a while, or ring me up, or message me on Facebook. And I know who to help and who not to. And I know when to send them to see a shrink most of the time.
Right. Well, I mean, you have to vet. You have to
Yes.
vet. And, even in, in writing books and things like that, and, investigating places, you can kind of tell when people may have some sort of activity. And I don't call, I've never been a ghost hunter. I've been a researcher. Even in things that I've dealt with, what would appear to be a shadow creature, something like that, I don't make the discernment of going, oh, it's this and that, because I don't know. And anybody who says they do are either fooling themselves or straight up liars, charlatans. But there is a certain thing, because understand, I had worked in corrections for, many years. You get that gift of discernment and can kind of size a person up, and some of it's body posture, some of it's the way their eyes are, their reactions. You kind of become a bit of a profiler just by nature. And like you said, you can kind of see when people are earnest and when they're just looking for whatever other subplot they've got in their head.
Well, most do.
Well,
we'd be lying if we didn't think we all have personal motives.
Well, no, of course. I mean, that was one thing. You always talk about people being, that's the thing. Friends are friends because they see maybe either something missing in themselves, or they maybe say, oh, this person's really cool. When I was a kid, I made friends with, some kids that had like a lot of Hot Wheels cars or something, or maybe they made friends with me because I was kind of a bigger guy and they were smaller guys. It was kind of like my Bodyguard kind of scenario. Do you remember that movie?
Bodyguard with Whitney Houston?
No. Way back.
Then probably not, I guess.
No,
That's
yeah.
what came to my mind. I'm thinking of the one where, I think it's Kevin Costner. I can't even remember. It's her. I don't know. So probably not. Just ruined your reference.
No. You got to remember, I'm a little bit older. I was born in '69, so it was actually a movie that had. There was a movie called Meatballs that had Bill Murray in it. It was a comedy, and there was a kid in it. I mean, man, I'm going so off the reservation with this story, but there was a character, and his name was Rudy, and he was real fast. He was small, and they called him Rudy the Rabbit.
Oh, I know that.
And then he was in another movie where I can't think of the guy's name. He was a big guy. He made friends with this big kind of loner guy because he wanted a bodyguard. And I said, that's very, symbiotic relationships happen for a lot of reasons, but that's one of them, self-protection and trying to become inclusive in whatever group, so you're not just twisting in the wind on your own, because sometimes it's really hard to be an individual, and what's the thing, it's not easy being green. When you stand out on your own, that's hard. Fringe personalities and fringe whatever get marginalized a lot, and we've seen in history kind of how those people are treated sometimes.
As a gay witch, I would have no idea what that means.
Absolutely not.
It's true. Yeah. And that's part of the witch archetype as well, is that generally speaking, it is someone at a certain point in history that stood at the fringe of society. And before persecution came into being, they stood at the fringe of society because they were respected, but they were usually kind of out in the corner somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, the thing was, okay, like obviously, like you said, you come to magic, or magic maybe rather come to you. I don't really believe in luck. I don't believe in happenstance. I think there's pretty much a synchronicity and a thing that just is going to happen. I pretty much think to a point we end up. Not, I mean, I'm not saying necessarily just horrific things happen to you, but generally you kind of level out and end up in where most likely you kind of are gonna go.
We hope so.
Well,
that's the quest, isn't it?
well,
That's the quest perilous, is to find your true will, to find your place in the world. And we're all seeking that, if you find it, you'll be a very happy person, and you'll be driven in that arena, like you were saying earlier. You'll be naturally drawn to it. If you tell your kids, do something that you love, well, if you love it, first of all, if you love it, you're probably going to be really good at it. You're going to be drawn to it for a reason. I do think that any priesthood, if someone truly belongs into it, because we know, and there's many priesthoods, including the craft, where there are people who are in it who probably didn't belong into it, but if they're truly called by spirit, God, goddess, whatever you want to call it, then they're going to, they're going to excel in it. They're going to immerse their whole being into it, and they're going to thrive, and they're going to be happy, and they're going to serve humanity. So I think I think that's what happened to me. I think that the art of the craft is what I enjoy most in the world. It is my life's work. On every level, there is an inner court and there is an outer court, and they're very different playing fields. They are not the same playing field at all. There's the occult world, which is another playing field on its own, I guess. So, there's all these different dimensions, but the true craft is what happens in my circles with my coven, and it doesn't really happen anywhere else.
well, there's a certain. I'm trying to find the right words for this because I don't want to come off sounding hokey or Pollyanna about it. But it's a thing where you know when you're home, when you are accepted, and that's not saying that you aren't challenged in your circle. That's just the nature of it. I don't necessarily mean in like a pecking order, but friends, true friends, bring out the best in you, and sometimes sometimes they'll kind of call you on your silliness, on your BS, just because it's like, no, come on, honey, really, let's talk, and they'll kind of give you a little time to wallow on this and that, but not long. A true friend's not going to do that. They're going to help you dust yourself off and help get you back out there, and they they're there for you to lean on, but they're also there to kind of push you up and kind of go, hey, you need to snap out of it. And I think the fact that I think people have this Hollywood thing of how covens are, and just like any other religious sect, it's probably has more, like you said, ritual that would be recognizable, to people than not. Just because I think humans by nature are ritualistic. They always talk about someone being a creature of habit. It's very hard not to be. That's why it's so easy for people to watch, like someone like a Mark or something, like an investigator or whatever. Okay, well, this guy comes out for lunch at blah blah blah, and he's already home. He always takes this route. We're very easy to track and kind of guesstimate where our next moves are, and but I think I think we're hardwired for that. Be it faith or be it whatever, and I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I just think it's just a component of the human animal, which I think we are animals. I don't think there's a lot of difference between us and whatever you want to call them, lesser creatures or stuff. I hate to choose that term, but the concept of whatever. I just think people have gotten into the thing of thinking, well, we're way up here. And we're so far advanced. I'm like, 100 years ago, we didn't have half of what we got now.
No, that's why we're destroying our planet.
Well, we're like giant children, we're giant children with a flamethrower.
You've got the Egyptians who, were one of the most sophisticated civilizations on Earth, with one of the most advanced set of occult practices that we've ever seen, which have influenced us to the present day more than most people realize. they put, animal heads on half their gods. They were not separate from nature. It wasn't just because they were, trying to create mythological creatures, but that they saw God in all life. And so they would use those symbols and incorporate them. It didn't necessarily have to be a full-on human being, It could be just a cat or just a ram. You get that in Native American culture as well, or some of the old, ancient shamanic cultures. You go to the Celts and you'll find that the gods are always associated with certain animals, or they'll shapeshift into certain animals. We've completely separated ourselves from nature, and that is one of the other things that the craft brings to the world. And I do sound like that's what I'm here to talk about, is the craft. So, and I'm trying to paint it in a nice picture right here before Halloween. I do think it's one of the other reasons people are drawn to these types of religions, is because it does reconnect you to nature, something we've been divided. It reconnects us to our past, to our ancestors. I'm actually writing a book. I can't say too much about it, or my editor, who I also happen to be married to, will kill me. He's a very wicked editor. Slave driver. So, it is a book about initiatory witchcraft. And, one of the things that I do highlight in it is the fact that that's another aspect of Western civilization that was taken from us a long time ago. And I think the craft and movements like it, movements in the occult, have been an unwinding process from a few thousand years where we lost our traditions, and there's a lot of reconstruction going on, but it's still coming back to things that we used to actually do, things that were done in Egypt. As they say, there's nothing new under the sun. So,
well, and that's a very, very true thing, a very telling comment. And the thing that I was thinking about too is, because of course, we are going to be talking about a little bit more into delving deeper into the magical aspect of this, but people like to think again, oh well, that's then. I mean, but even something as simple as, you hope something good comes along. Well, hey, hope you get the job. Me too. Knock on wood, or this and that. And there's so many little things that were tied in with mysticism and early occult practices. Even and this is not going to necessarily make everybody happy, but dates of holidays, dates of the Yule log, all that stuff is tied in with early, what you would call more pagan belief, which I hate to say that because it sort of sounds like it's denouncing it in some way and putting it on in an inferior thing. It's older. It's so much older, and people.
I was just joking to myself before we had this phone call. Sorry, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm, yeah, go right ahead.
A little. Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, go right ahead.
Sorry, I thought it was breaking up. It was right before this. I was thinking about what you were just saying. If people are interested in that, all you have to do is go online and actually research Catholic holidays. I suppose if you don't know anything about the craft, it won't mean anything to you. But how Catholics actually celebrate the same holidays in much of the same way that we do is telling. I suppose you could say, initiates of witchcraft are pre-Christian Catholics, because a lot of Catholicism was taken from old pagan sources. There's just no doubt about it. There are people who will argue against that to this day and debate over it, but it's just clearly obvious, and I think it's pretty well known. That
the holiday is, was it Saturnarian? I'm saying that correctly? Where they basically, sugarcoated.
No, I can't say it either. Saturnalian or something like that.
There it
yes,
is.
It's a Roman holiday. Mm-hmm.
Right, and it kind of tied in around the time of the 25th, and there was a lot of orgies and people beating the crap out of each other. But at the end, people give each other's gifts. There was that, and all that ties in with that, and the lights on the trees, were candles on the trees, but it's like we don't talk about that. It's like this great big elephant in the room, and it's just like, nope, not happening, nothing to see here. And I'm like, really? I said, why are you so scared? And that's what kills me. It's like, you act like it's this thing that they always say, oh, well, that's not real. There's no truth. There's no power there. Then why are you so afraid of it? Why
One of the most sacred times for the goddess in the old seasons was, as you probably know, most of you, May Day. That's why we have the crowning of the May Queen and all this stuff in folklore. In the Catholic Church, there isn't a holiday for May because the entire month of May is dedicated to the Virgin Mary, and her statues are to be adorned with roses for the entire month. Pretty big statement.
Right. Well, I mean, it wasn't that long ago that, and the thing is, people take symbology, like the maypole. A lot of people stopped doing that in the U.S., but, especially like around after World War II, because they, well, that's more of a German rite, and they talk, well, the swastika, which was an ancient symbol. It's a sun symbol. The Chinese have used it, and they've used it for millennia. Just it was co-opted by a nut, and so now it's like, well, now we can't use this. It's like, I don't understand. I'm not saying I want to walk around with a big swastika, but
theirs is crooked. They do theirs a little differently. If you research it, if I remember correctly, theirs goes counterclockwise and it's crooked, whereas the original is clockwise and it's not crooked. But people would mistake it and get offended. You're right.
That wasn't it like a three-legged seal of Hermes, I believe?
There's several different variations. I mean, you're right. You can find it in the Orient. You find it in Norse mythology, German mythology. It was a sun wheel. That's what it was supposed to be originally, but unfortunately the Third Reich adopted it as the symbol of their movement, and they changed it. And there were a lot of cultists in the Third Reich. And in fact, they actually persecuted other occultists. We've got people like Franz Bardon. If you don't know who he is, he's worth looking into. He was actually in a concentration camp. He's a world-renowned occultist. They persecuted people who knew runes. They even had a particular system of runes they wanted to promote, and they didn't want some of the older runes to be promoted. So there was a lot going on with that. They were trying to create their own new religion. They wanted to create a national religion. So they were full on going for it.
Well, what's so trippy is, and because it's so funny, because like I said, I don't know if it's just because I'm at the age now, because I'll watch stuff like, you probably don't watch stuff like Svengoolie or nothing like that on MeTV, but I'll watch like some old shows on that, but I also watch a lot of History Channel and stuff. And so my wife like hears something going on and hear like tanks, is like, are you watching a Hitler documentary? I said, it happens to be on. It's an extremely interesting thing due to the fact that it amazes me that this little stubby dude was able to, corral all these people into doing such goofy stuff. But it showed you the charisma and just the power that this guy, I mean, I'm not saying it like, ooh, how cool he was, but the fact that he was able to pull that off, and the fact that he studied, magicians on stage and how to, because when you speak in front of large audiences, and I don't want to make this about Hitler, but there are gestures and certain movements that are, I don't want to say they are magical, but they produce certain things. It's like if a person's upset, I've seen people do this on television a lot. If a person is very upset and they kind of touch their shoulder or put their hands on them, it's sort of a control thing. It's subtle, and then people will stop talking. They'll like kind of seize up, and it's just because it's like, oh, I'm being touched. There's so much there that people don't realize.
Sorry about that.
No, that's fine.
Would you handle whatever that is and get the dogs in the bathroom for me, please? Thank you.
So tell
Sorry.
me
I knew that would happen at one point in time. Sorry.
No, that's totally fine. Like I said, that's the beauty of it. Let's talk about your dogs real quick. What kind of dogs you got?
I have 3 poodles. They're all toy poodles. Tank, Toodles, and Tiki. Actually, I should have said that the other way. Toodles is the oldest. He's about 22. Very old for a dog. Tank's going on about 10, and Tiki's going on about 2. So I call them my therapists, my 3-headed dog.
Now, are they your familiars, or are they just your pets?
What's a familiar? I'd say that they're both, I guess. I mean, I don't necessarily equate. I've never done sort of a ritual. I think animals are magical. I think they've been magical in almost every culture, and certainly they can be your best companions and friends, and they have magic of their own. But I don't think witches really have, movie style animal familiars. Usually what that was talking about were, spirits that were summoned, thought forms, fairies that people were working with, things like that. And it comes from folklore. People reconstruct folklore and make it into, what they want. So, you've got a cat you really love, you feel psychically bonded to it, it's your familiar. I think most people are just sort of playing around when they say that. So I guess they're all my familiars, and once in a while I do wonder if something resides with them that's not quite human. Am I being watched? But I bet you everyone feels that way. Sometimes when you look at your animals, it's like little humans looking back. There's something going on in the eyes. So I'd have to say both, I suppose. But I never did any diabolical ritual to contact a familiar.
Well,
not an animal one, anyway.
Well, I was going to ask you, because like I said, we've bounced all over, and that's what I like about this. I know you've done like a lot of interviews, and and I just don't. I hate sticking on a format. It's boring to me. I think it's overdone, and I just want to kind of, like I said, I'm going to ask you about your dogs. I'm going to ask you about this and that, just because, as the spirit moves me, pardon the pun, that's just how I feel. But I was going to ask you two things. Where can people learn more in regards about your work, about your businesses, about the books that are coming out? Do you have some web pages real quick?
Well, we do have hexwitch.com, and we have omensalem.com. We've got Facebook groups and things like that as well. You could search it, Hex Old World Witchery, Omen in Salem. It's not really hard to find. So yes, we do have websites. You can order on there. We've got a website for the Festival of the Dead. We've got a Facebook page for everything. We virtually have some sort of bizarre Facebook empire. We've got so many pages. I think Hex Old World Witchery has over 30,000 people on there. So, definitely there's plenty of places where you can find resources. The stories are a little bit different. I like to think of Hex as being sort of, the fun Wicked Witch, and Omen is kind of Glinda, so they're just modeled to different tastes and styles. Same with Hexfest. Hexfest is very New Orleans-y. We get a lot of, root workers, Southern practitioners of voodoo and things like that are different. I mean, we still have witches as well, of course, but they're usually New Orleans witches. So, which, we come, even if you weren't born here, if you weren't born in the South, I'm sure you could tell everyone it eventually gets and creeps into your soul. So, and you start making cabbage and black-eyed peas at New Year's, and, it just starts creeping in there. So it's just a different flavor, a different style. I mean, Magik is a very big place, and there's very different venues. Christian has a book published already, The Witch's Book of the Dead. We are moving that to our publishing company so that he actually wants to create a new edition of it. And we've got some authors on the way. They'll, of course, we're still working that out. We just started launching that concept within this last month. There is I think if you probably Google Warlock's Press, you'll probably find it. There's already an application online for potential authors to submit book ideas. And we've got a list of some already well-established authors. Like I said, I can't say too much right now, but who are already, committed some ideas. So, and my book is painfully well on its way. So, you go a little mad writing a book, I think.
Well, well, I mean, and this is going to be cringy because I identify as a male as I am a male, but I would say it's probably as close intellectually to giving birth as you can think about it. You have all the fears: will it be accepted? Will it this and that? Did I do enough for it? Did I give it enough nourishment? Did I, is it going to be well rounded? How, and then you put it out there, and then you're like, oh my God, it's no longer within me now. Now it's out there.
I can't wait. I want this thing out of me.
Oh, it's exciting. It really is exciting, and especially once you get those positive sounds back and all that, because you're always going to have naysayers. It's just the nature of it. But overall, I guarantee people are going to receive it just wonderfully, and I'm excited to check it out myself. But I was going to ask you this as well. Old Magik, classic Magik. I don't know which is more probably true in regards of its definition. What is it to you? What does it mean to you? I know it's like, okay, in an essay, in 5,000 words or less, what does it mean to you? What, obviously, because people take different things away from different stuff. People digest different things from any one element. One person could watch a scene, or 5 people could watch, one movie scene and take away 5 different meanings. What does it mean to you? In regards
well, without going into too long of a history lesson, sure. We really have it down to, with the rise of Christianity and the fall of the mystery cults, magic withdrew from the world. It became in Western civilization, which is, what I'm going to focus on for this topic. India never lost its magic, but we're going to focus on the West because that's where we are. It fell away and it only survived in fragments of folklore. Usually there were in rural places, Christians that practiced folk magic. Then it was very high, well-known noble families, popes, the well-educated, the high and the elite, who were able to read and write, who actually really kept all the grimoires and all the secrets that came down to us through Greece and Egypt. And they retained this information regardless of whether they're Christian or not. And they were in better positions to be able to hold secrets. People often talk about witchcraft families. If there was going to be a real witchcraft family that survived, it would have been among the very wealthy, because they would have been the only ones capable of keeping a secret that long and passing it down without being worried about something going awry. I'm not talking about folk magic. I'm not talking about hanging up a horseshoe or lighting a candle, but I'm talking full-on ritual. Magic, as it has been defined, it's a big thing. What kind of magic are we talking about? Big magic, small magic, The greatest magic is asking for transformation. You were saying earlier how we're animals. I think the initiate seeks the as above, so below, the Hermetic principle, to become like the divine. That can take many incarnations, and it may not all take place in this world, but that's the mission, if it's even possible to accomplish. In that process, there are different kinds of people. There are people who, they go to magic for their basic needs. They need fertility for their crops. They need, to be healed. They want love. They want wealth. They want money. They want protection. And then there's the kind of magic that transforms the world. I think magic is the gift that we were given. To put it in Christian terms, the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. A true magician has that knowledge and realizes that magic is neither good nor evil. And hopefully they will use it for good. So I don't know if that really answers your question. I think magic is the fabric of a great power and gift. I think magic, in a sense, is the biggest gift that Goddess gave us. It's the breath of life. And when you're truly connected to it, then you actually know how to pray, I suppose. Because we are responsible. That old saying, God helps those who help themselves. We are given the tools we need on this earth to function and to live. We were given a great gift. I think it's very clear to everybody who's logically minded that God is not babysitting us, that God is not getting up every day and wondering if we cleaned our room. Probably has better things to do. We have been given all the tools that we need to function and to evolve for whatever purpose we were created. And if all of this is nonsense, it doesn't matter anyway.
No. Well, what was the old quote? Nobody's getting out alive.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's very true. And I think that there are certain, we could actually have a whole nother show and talking about the connections between art, music, and the mystical. I do think that there's a magic in a very spontaneous, real tapping into whatever energy is there. I know we were touching a little bit on the Hellenistic or Hermetic beliefs. Now, where I come to know a little bit about that now, like I said, I don't know how you feel about this individual, but was like the works of Crowley, and I know some people like him, some people hate him, some people say, well, he was this or he was that. The more sensationalist stuff, I couldn't prove it, so I'm just like, all I know is I know he definitely seemed like he was a devotee and definitely had an interest in the old magic, and I think a lot of people may have come to it from that little bit of a sensationalist view, because sometimes, let's be real about it. say if there was a UFO down the street, who are you going to talk to? The PhD, who's very quiet and reserved, or the guy's going, yeah, man, I done seen it. That sucker was 20 foot. That's the guy you're putting on there, because everyone's going, whoa, look at this freak. And you're going to listen to the guy who's got the most bold, largest fish story. And I'm not trying to miscount, his works and the Book of Law and whatnot. But what is your take on that? And if you want to get into it, and if you don't, that's fine.
Well, the first thing I'd say is I don't have an opinion on whether I like Crowley or not, because I never met the man. But what I will say is that he's become a mythic creature. So there's lots of stories about him we don't know if they're real or not. And then there's some things we do know. You could be the most brilliant brain surgeon in the world and still be a manic depressive person who kills themselves or drinks themselves to death. I think this explains Crowley a little bit. If I was going to give my judgment, I think he started out in the Golden Dawn. He was a brilliant magician. I think he had great knowledge of the magical arts. Outside of mythic beliefs, he did destroy himself in the end. So one can take away from that however they want. Did he go the wrong way? I don't know. I don't know the real reason. But in magic, results always matter. So you can't take someone and say, this person was Merlin, the greatest magician ever lived, but he died a heroin addict. That doesn't really translate well, does it? Being a knowledgeable magician and being a good magician are not necessarily the same thing. You can, I'd rather have a reliable person who, isn't going to destroy themselves than a knowledgeable one. I think that he was a brilliant man, and I think that somewhere in his life he took a wrong turn. So in the end, magic wasn't his salvation in this life. That would be my perception. It's not a judgment either. It's just simply, because I've studied his work, I think he did some really brilliant things. But he was also taught by brilliant people. He didn't come up with all of it on his own. Most of his training came through the Golden Dawn, and then he built upon an already established order. The OTO was in existence before him, and when he when he became the leader of that, he developed Thelema, which was all channeled work. So there was a lot piled on there that was his ability to learn from others. I think most of the founders of the Golden Dawn were brilliant occultists, and they were highly educated people. Most of them did not end up dead from heroin overdoses. Most of them lived out their lives very well. and we don't have all these diabolical stories. So I think you've got to look at it, I certainly wouldn't bash him. I certainly wouldn't say don't read his books. I guess my own personal theory would be that I think in his pursuit for power, I think he took a wrong turn. And he did develop some work where he was concentrating a lot on the lower self, concentrating so much on the animal self. I don't think he ever contacted his higher guardian angel. I think he contacted his lower guardian angel. And that could be a very tricky path, So, I don't know. Theories, though. I don't know. I never met the man. Would I have liked him and enjoyed him? Probably until he tried to sleep with me.
Oh, come on. And that's the thing. Excuse me. When... again, I'm trying to be like a glass half full kind of guy. And I'm going like you talked about, bringing that more into the modern age. Obviously bands like, Led Zeppelin, and a lot of people idolize them, do what they will and all that. Oh,
I think he was brilliant. I don't think that he didn't. I think his magic worked. I just think somewhere along the lines, something went wrong, he got into drugs, whether that was because of magic or whether because he just made bad choices.
Well, I think too, you get to a certain point and you see this with a lot of famous people and a lot of people who, again, become somewhat insular, and they kind of they lose a little touch with reality. And, people, almost everything people remember, heroin addict, and blood magic, blood sex magic, stuff like that, which whatever, you can take it from whatever, but there's so much. I mean, we could do a whole show on the connection with blood throughout religions. And good Lord, drink of this is my blood, eat of this is my flesh. If a person from another planet come down here, they would look at it like they're cannibals. What was the thing, on the Toy Story? My God, they're cannibals. They're eating them. it's so strange, again, because we were talking a little bit about looking at it from the outside, because until I was probably in my early, not teens quite yet, because I was watching stuff like In Search Of, but then I'd learn, oh well, they have fragments of saints or bones of saints, and I'm going, so there's like holy dead guys in the walls. I didn't get it. I didn't understand it, and that was not me being judgmental. It was just like going, okay, this is new. And so you had to you take like a slither of all of the whole, and you can misconstrue it or come away with it with your own personal, I don't want to say your hang-ups, but whatever, preconceived notions. And then of course then the mind, as humans do, we love to
I think if you're interested in high magic, ceremonial magic, I think he's a necessary study. But it depends on what, most of his early books are really reworked Golden Dawn material. The Book of the Law is all his channeled work, which I've read, and honestly, there were some really valuable things in it. And then the rest of it, I thought he must have been on acid. Maybe it was my inability to comprehend. But I'm also not a full-on magician. My love is the craft. I do study ceremonial magic. I think that any real witch is a good occultist. However, I don't necessarily follow along the Crowley lines completely, even though I've studied his work. But if you're interested in that sort of thing, I don't see how you couldn't read his books. They're some of the best.
Well, of course, and that's the thing. Again, I've always had that, stand near the flame but never quite jump in it, and that was just, I've always wanted to be more of I would be probably more of like the Mayfair kind of witches, like I want to be the Rupert Giles of the group. I would much rather study it and categorize it and look at the causal effects as opposed to being in the belly of the beast, as it were. So, I don't know. And I think if I took away anything, if there is any blood, what are we going to say, like, memory, what do you call it, genetic memory or muscle memory, from any of my forebears, on my end, it probably comes into working with herbs. I love herb gardens, and I know it probably doesn't sound super, whatever, but that's my thing. It's always called me out. Always do a lot of stuff with mints and thyme and all those different type of things, and be outside, got the wind chimes going, and it's very southern, and you can smell the honeysuckle. There's a magic in that. In a lot of the books I write, I always have tactile things, kind of touchstones, where it's like, boom, here's this, to where when someone else is out doing something, it's like, oh yeah, it reminds me of that passage from the book. That way it feels more real, and to me that's kind of I won't say it's magic, but it's sort of like trying to put somebody in the moment. So maybe if I have anything from that, maybe that's what that come from. But here in just a couple seconds here, I'm going to go to my outro. Is there any words of wisdom that you want to leave us with?
Words of wisdom. I definitely, I would say that, what I would want people to remember about witchcraft is, it wasn't always called witchcraft. The origins of the word witchcraft are debated. Is it something that happened during the Christian persecutions, or was it a priesthood that existed before? That's going to be debated for the end of time, probably. Its old root words are Wicca and Wiccae, which is actually pronounced Witche and Witcha, without getting too into it. Look it up. Wicca is actually not the way it's really pronounced. That being said, it's a positive, life-affirming religion, whether you think it has ancient origins or not. And witches are here to help people, and they do heal, and they do love, and they do worship their gods. We're not all that different at the end of the day. The only difference is we take full responsibility for our own worlds and our own prayers. So, happy Halloween, everyone.
Well said, Brian. Everybody, Mr. Brian Cain, I want to thank Brian and Christian and those beautiful little poodles that are running around. Thank you for letting me have some time with you guys. And I want to tell everybody to make sure to visit stevieasher.com and check me out on YouTube under Conflict Radio and also America's Most Haunted Network. Brian, again, thank you again for being on. I want everyone to spend the rest of the day in each other's presence. Love one another, love yourselves, and don't be afraid to let yourself be a little scared. So until next time, everybody,